60? 60. Lamed on base. Halacha Daled. With your waiter, sorry. Hamachli Pora B'Chamor. Lots of Mishnayos for a little Gemara tonight. Hamachli Pora B'Chamor. Somebody who switches a cow for a donkey, Violda, and the cow gives birth. So to somebody who sells his servant woman, and the servant gives birth. The one who's selling says, well, the birth occurred before I sold. The one who bought says, birth occurred when I bought from after I bought. Nobody knows for sure. Yachloka, they divvy it up. I mean, not that they cut the child in two, but they sell it and they split the proceeds, right? But if you had two slaves, one large and one small. Two fields, one large and one small. The buyer says, I got to look out there, but the big one. The seller says, any of that I don't know. So he's on the defense of the seller. He doesn't know what to answer. He loses, and the buyer acquires the bigger field and the bigger Evan. Bori V'Shema, that's right. The seller says, with clarity, I sold the smaller one. Then the buyer says, I do not know. Again, Bori V'Shema, the seller is definite, the buyer is in doubt. He only gets the smaller field or the smaller slave. One says definitively the large one. It's obviously the buyer. The other one says definitively the smaller one. It's obviously the seller. The seller takes an oath that he sold the smaller one, and that's all the fellow gets. Which says, I don't know. They divide in half. Rabbi Yochanan said, this case, the case specifically where each one is bari, each one says with clarity and definitiveness, then the buyer, the seller takes the oath and he gets to retain the larger field. It precludes Sumchos's position. Sumchos said the opinion that all Sfekus you divvy up 50-50. Here we see that based on his oath, the seller gets to keep the larger field. So this is not like Sumchos. I'm a Rabbi Law, so Tapulam from Rabbi Law says, who says? Maybe it's no proof to Sumchos. Tipata b'shazel mer barley v'sel mer barley. Our mission is talking about which one's bari. Maybe Sumchos only made a statement which one is Shema, where each one is in doubt. There Sumchos said a statement which is in line with what our mission says. Our mission says when each one is in doubt, you split it up 50-50. How you know Sumchos said it by bari? Rabbi Yossi stated, actually, again, it's not a question here, if it's the case of each one being bari, in fact, this is the case which Rabbi Yochanan said Sumchos is incorrect. And the Maraponim explains, that's Moshe's Perush on the bottom, that there's a big machlekes in the Bavli where the Sumchos made a statement only where each one is unsure, even though each one is sure. Rabbi Yochanan is of the opinion that Sumchos made a statement even where each one is sure, and nevertheless Sumchos said they divided up 50-50. And there Rabbi Yochanan said our Mishnah is clearly indicative against Sumchos, because our Mishnah says where each one is sure and definite, nonetheless they don't split it down the middle. Rather, the seller takes the shvuah and he gets to keep the property. That's why it's a proof against Rabbi Yochanan's understanding of what Sumchos held. Okay? Halacha hey, hamoicher zeisav leitim, somebody who sold his olives for the wood. Now that means that the buyer gets the olive wood, right? But not the land under the olive trees, right? Land under the olive trees remains the buyers, right? The sellers, excuse me. So he sells the olives for the wood. For us, when they produce fruit, now fruit, the question is who gets to keep the fruit. If it produces less than a quarter measure per saw, I don't know how much a saw of wood is, but it produces a very small amount. The guy who bought the wood for the logs, he gets to keep also the product in that produce in that case because it's relatively small. Also, however, they made a larger amount. The one guy says, well, it's my olive trees. I put the wood. They grew the fruits. The other guy says, well, it's my land which caused it to grow because it was nurtured by my land. So Yachloku, they split it up. Now, if one guy has olive trees growing, and a river swept them away and replanted them in somebody else's field, in his friend's field, so now it grows fruit. So the one guy says, the guy whose olive trees originally were says, my olives grew the fruit. The other says, my land grew the olives. Here too, they divided up. Now, there's a little bit of cryptic Gemara. I'm going to give you back off for shot in it. Rabbi Yochanan Boyer Tivu Mind. Rabbi Yochanan asked, what if the new guy irrigated? Shouldn't he get credit? Right? He irrigated, he should get credit for it. If otherwise the wood would have died, it was swept down river. Says Ravuna Mar B'Sheshotfon, when they were swept down, here it says B'Gusheim with their blocks, but in the Escorial it's a nice girsa. It's not necessarily different, but well, it is different, but it really means the same thing. It says B'Gishmeil, when they were swept down river with their rains, meaning that they were swept down river with enough water embedded in the land which was swept down river with it. So in that case, the second guy has no taina, right? Now, Rabbi Yossi Rechina Mer Shnei Orla Beinein, the difference between the two opinions, it's not really a machlokas, right? But Rabbi Yochanan said about a case where the other new guy had to irrigate it, right? He had to replant it in essence. Ravuna says, our Mishnah talking about a case where when it was swept down river together with its dirt, or with the rain embedded in its dirt. So he says, Shnei Orla Beineim, the difference is obviously what it has to do with start Orla from scratch. Orla is the first 3 years of the tree, right? If the tree is uprooted and replanted, you got to start the 3 years from scratch. So according to Rabbi Yochanan's understanding, that it needed new irrigation, also would need to have 3 more years of Orla before you can eat it again. According to Ravuna, that it came down with a clump of dirt which preserved the rainwater inside it, then it's considered to have been transported in its full age, and therefore it doesn't have to keep Orla years over again. That's true, but that clump of dirt, the reason why they split is because he says you got to, had that clump of dirt remained in the middle of the river, then the tree would have died regardless, right? Wouldn't have made an island. So that's what he says. In the Yerushalmi Bava, there's whole discussion of Yishuv soil. Whether you can uproot the trees from the new place and put them back to the old place because of Yishuv soil, you can't do it. But I for some reason in the Yerushalmi it doesn't figure. I don't know, maybe, but I saw where it came from Chutz La'aretz to Eretz Yisrael, and here it's both in Eretz Yisrael, so it doesn't make a difference. I don't know exactly. Yeah, that's what I was assuming here too. Although Orla is also Chutz La'aretz, that's no proof. But I assume it would be in Eretz Yisrael. Okay. Hamaskir Ba'is Chavero, B'Yimosak Shami. There's a lot of, in the Bavli, of course, all this pages and pages, but Yerushalmi, boom, boom, boom. Hamaskir Ba'is Chavero, somebody who rents a house to his friend B'Yimosak Shami in the rainy season, in the winter. That's this cursed season in Chicago. Eino Yochel Lotzio Minach.
It's a rainy season.
Yeah. Eino Yochel Lotzio Minach Chag Ada Pesach. You can't evict him from Sukkot till Pesach. It sounds like even he gets into arrears, but I'm not sure about that. But it sounds like it's like the gas is right. In the sunny season, in the summer, shloshim yom, you can evict him after 30 days. What exactly it means, I want to explain a little bit better. That's only in the hinterlands, in the metropolitan areas. There are apartments to be had, regardless, but it's actually more severe, both in the summer and in the winter, minimum 12 months. Also in stores. It makes a difference if you're in a city or a village. He gets it for a minimum of 12 months. A store of bakers and of dyers is a big investment involved. So therefore the minimum lease period is 3 years. Okay? Says Martani Kol Yerushalmi Shloshim Yom V'Yud Beis Chodesh. That which says our Mishnah 30 days into a month. Lo shiur the b'tochim Shloshim Yom V'Yud Beis Chodesh. It's not the extent of time that they live in the apartment minimally. Rather, El Shildi, it's the amount of notice you must give. If you have to give notice in the summer, Koyem Shloshim Yom, 30 days before you evict somebody or don't renew his lease, and you have to give notice in metropolitan areas. You have to give notice, regardless if it's summer or winter, 12 months in advance. Okay, which is a very big chiddush, but that's the way it works. You have to give 12 months notice. Beis Abad, or by an olive press, you can't evict a guy called Shas Beis Abad for the entire duration of the olive pressing season. Beis Agas, the wine press, calls Shas Agas the entire time of the wine press. Beis Hayotzor, the house of a clay worker, a potter, ain't Paul's Mishem Sochosh, no less than 12 months. Rabbi Yosef said, when's it's true, with those people who work with dark dirt. Dark dirt, it seems, is a more viable dirt, which requires more of a craft in order to make. Avelu shows seem but those who do work with white dirt, which is a cheap dirt, which required no elaborate preparations, kind is Garno, you tell them, get your tools together and get. Okay? Kone's Garno means get your tools together, you mistalek and kick them out. Because that is a lowly trade which doesn't require much setting up process. Just get rid of it. New page. Turn page 62. Lamed Alpha base. Hamaskir by Chaver, somebody rents a house to his friend. Hamaskir Chaver, the landlord is liable, but Deles to put up the door, Benagar, the bolt, Uvemanu, the lock. And anything which requires a craftsman or an artisan. Which is not the work of a craftsman or an artisan. The tenant's got to do it. Hazevel, the fertilizer of cows passing through the yard, right? The pooper scoopers. So Hazevel Shabbat Bais, then the landlord gets to keep the fertilizer. And all the tenant gets is the ashes which come from the various ovens and stoves. That he gets to keep, but not the fertilizer. That's until to Baal Baises.
Whose cows?
No, neither of theirs. They're third party cows. Okay. Mezuzah, Maisa de Uma. Now it's interesting, it's not in the Bavli. Mezuzah normally holds Chovas Hador as the obligation of the individual who lives in the apartment. But here, when you're setting up a mezuzah in the door, especially the old days, they used to do the mezuzah in the old days, still if you go to Yerushalmi. They used to hollow it out, right? So that's a Maisa Uma. So the hollowing out of the wall in order to place the mezuzah in place, that's upon the maskir. So the actual klaf might be the responsibility of the tenant, but the placing is the responsibility of the landlord. Yeah, it does make sense. Hello, Ches. We did one blot so far. How many minutes was that? 10 minutes? Hamaskir b'ais chaveru. Somebody who rents a house to his friend Lashona for a year. V'sap Lashona, the year became leap. Okay, so it's a 13-month year. The tenant gets the extra month for gratis, for free. Okay? Hiskal Chodoshim, if you rent it over by month, right, then the Sabra Shana, if it's leap year, and the Sabra Lamaskir, it's the landlord's advantage, he charges.
Same principle like we had last week about rental annual basis versus
right, that's what it is. That's really what it is. That's right. Maisi Sipori, there's a Maisu in Sipori, Be'echot Shesachar Merchatz Mechaver, somebody hired a bathhouse from Cern, B'shnei Masar Zav L'Shana, for $12 a year, B'dinar Zav L'Chodesh, a dinar a month. Now, that was the language of the contract. So it was a very, very ambiguous contract, because it measured both the term of a year and the term of per month, right? So what do you do with an extra month in a leap year? Uba Maisav Ner Shagam Liav Ner Rabbi Yossi, V'omer, they said, because they are in doubt, they divide up the leap month because they don't know what to do. Says Marvechi, what is this case we're dividing up? We should apply the laws of Mitzvah Chaver Lavaraya. The person who wants to extricate the money has got to bring the proof. Therefore, if the landlord comes to the tenant at the end of the month, the tenant is already collected. He says, aha, prove to me that the law says I got to pay you. Otherwise, I thumb my nose at you, right? I already enjoyed my month. It's tough on you. And vice versa. If he comes on the first day of the month, he says, get or pay, right? He says, either you have to pay me or you have to get out of here. So what's the scenario? So Shmuel says, Kini Masni. So this is the law, this is the Mishnah. It's talking about when he comes in the middle of the month. That's why Achloku. Because he came on the 15th day of the month and asked for the rent, so they split it. Rab says, Dina, so to Skorial is a little bit better. Girsa, a lot better. Girsa. Dina the Gaidi Donu. That was a law passed by weavers. Meaning he's insulting. He says weavers would paskin this way. Either it's going back on Shmuel, who said it's so back in the middle of the month, or even back on the Mishnah itself, where they said Yachloku, they split. Because Rav holds not that way. Rav holds that in fact the tenant must pay for the extra month. He's got to pay. Rabbi Laura, Leis Pashto, is it not explained? Leis Pashto Doshitas Bananas, is it not that Rav's approach can be explained based on Bananas' Shita? What does Bananas say? Duamar says, Bitel Loshon Achoines Arishon. If you have a contract, the later language in the contract cancels the earlier language. And what did our Mishnah say the language in the contract was in the bathhouse in Tzipori? The first language is about the year, per annum. The second month was about month. I'd say month from Latin. It's per annum and per diem. What's per month? All right, amen. So the last language was per month, right? So per month, that language of per month cancels the earlier language of per annum, and therefore he has to pay. The tenant has to pay for the extra month.
So is this Loshon Nachman?
Yeah, it's like Loshon Nachman. That's right. So this is, I don't know if it's not. Loshon Nachman is used in the context of verbal statements in terms of kachim usually. But here it's talking about specifically contract law. Ben Nanus application specifically contract law. So I don't know if they necessarily agree. Yeah, I don't know. I'm not sure. It's a good question. I don't know. How look at this? If I rent out to you a house, I'm the landlord, right? V'nofel, and the house falls down. I got to give you another house, right? That's the contract, a replacement. All right. If the original house was small, don't give you a big house. God, if the original house is big, I don't make now a small house. If it was one house, don't make it now two houses. If it was two houses, don't make it one house. You don't detract from the amount of windows which it had. You don't add from them. Unless they both agree, and that's going, of course, the entire Mishnah. Reish Lakish says, when do I have to get precise to the same house? When I rented it out to my Mambido Agaba, I took him there and said, Yankel, this is the house I'm giving you, right? So then, obviously, you're obligated to restore that house if that house falls down, right? Rabbi Yochanan, it's only ba'is because ani maskil ella. The word ella really should be at the beginning. It means I'm only renting you house. In other words, it's not just that he shows him the house. He says only such a house I'm renting to you. In that case, if he when he rebuilds, he must be rebuilt precisely to the specification of the first one. Otherwise, if he didn't say that word ella or something similar to that, which is a limitation, he can deviate. Okay. So, Hamaska by
I don't see the difference between
one is more explicit. One is just is non-verbal. The other is verbal. Rabbi Yochanan means says declaration must be made. Right. It was just implicit, not explicit. The difference between implicit and explicit. Hamasker ba'is chaveru. Now this is an interesting halacha. I wonder how this works on modern law. Hamasker ba'is chaveru. There's some tshuva in the Ramah about this, but I didn't have a tshuva's Ramah on. I think I do, but I couldn't find it. Anyway, Hamasker ba'is chaveru. I rent a house to my friend. I, the landlord, that want to sell the house. Okay, so I rented it out. I want to sell it. Rabbi Ami said, "Lo," it should be the word message. It should be lo olas al das. As Koyel puts it in, lo olas al das ze almost parov. I'm not sure how hunger gets into it, but it doesn't make sense that he's selling it and that so that the new landlord should kick this guy out, because then he's going to die of hunger. So again, I'm not sure exactly. Maybe I got it wrong. Yeah, I got it wrong. Now I understand it. Now I understand the whole Gemara. I didn't understand it before. Okay. Now it's like, I see I got it wrong when I was preparing. Okay, well, I just said it's not true. Rabbi Ami says you're allowed to sell it. Just because if you're short of cash, you didn't rent out a house assuming that you're going to die of hunger. It's not the tenant who's going to let the head tenant. That's not the issue. You're selling the house because you need to raise funds, right? You're short of cash. So even though you rented out the house to the guy for a certain term, you didn't rent it out to him if in case you're strapped for cash. So therefore you can sell in the middle. Rabbi Hila, Tarvei, and Morin, they both said, Mikom makom kanile. No, it belongs to the tenant, no matter what, and therefore the lease transfers with the sale. Right? It's the lease which the tenant has transfers with the sale. It's a new landlord. El Duamar, he says, Shivke de Share, leave the guy, rather therefore when he sells, he must say, Shivke, leave the tenant in the house, the Share, that he should dwell there, ad the Yamale, until he fulfills Ankluvis, his lease, the day, right? The Ankluvis is Ankluvisim, it's a term for lease, or Asuv the Rabbi Nasi, so case came for Rabbi Nasi, V'lo kibel. He did not accept this condition. In other words, he said that you can sell the house even though the new landlord is going to kick the tenant out. Regardless, you can sell the house. So, last two words on the page. Ma palik. Does Rabbi Nisi argue on Rabbi Zir and Rabbi Hila? So it says more Amre. They said Barte Havas Mimashkanas Gabi Chad Roimi. This is a unique case. Normally you would agree that you have to stipulate with the new landlord to leave the tenant intact. But this is a special case because the daughter of the landlord was taken to captivity, was being held hostage by a certain Roman. And here are the few words missing, which is in the Kikalon and on the bottom of the previous page and at Scorial as well. The original landlord didn't have the money to redeem her. V'hora Rabbi Nisi Shiimkor. Rabbi Nisi paskin that he should sell. Begin kach begin kain horik Rabbi Ami. That's why in this case he paskin like Rabbi Ami. Even though normally you paskin that you do have to preserve the right of the tenant, but in this case it's like Rabbi Ami said, not where he's dying of hunger, and in this case not where his daughter is taken into captivity. Oh yeah, right. It's totally stupid things here. Okay, everything makes sense now. Makes sense to me. So while I waste where I wrote wrong here. Okay. Says the more the new parak. Hamakara l'sadach hamechavero. If somebody accepts a field as a contract, as a sharecropper, in the place where the people who are contract out the fields harvest, Yitzor, he should harvest. La'ador, they hoe, Ya'ador, he must hoe. La'charosh, they plow. La'acharov, after the harvest. Ya'achrosh, he has to plow after the harvest. Hakel kemia gamadino, everything based on the custom of the country. Kishem shechokim b'tvo, just like divide up the grain. Kachokim b'tevin v'kash, so to divide up the straw and the hay. Kishem shechokim b'yayin, just like divide up wine. Kachokim is moras, they also divide up the twigs, uvakanim, and the stalks. Which in all cases they divide up not just the product, the ultimate produce, but everything which comes out of the process. Because each year they're both pitched in as partners in cultivation, so therefore in reaping the profits they both reap equally. What if it's a place where the custom is to harvest? But this guy, instead of harvesting, he did much more work. He did pluck each stalk of grain individually out of the ground. So it says the Gemara, Amar Lei says to him, At Ba'isa is the word missing, which is Korea. At Ba'isa Mile. You wanted to work yourself more, that's your problem. I don't have to pay you for that. Especially the Lieberman throws in, because he can say that I'd rather have had the remnants of the stalks in the ground, that they should rot in the ground and provide fertilizer for next year. So I am not paying you more because you put yourself out more. And vice versa. Litlosh v'kotzar. If the custom is there in that locality to pluck out, and this sharecropper only harvested and left the stuff in the ground, so then we say to him, go out, and it should be redisa, go plow it out, because if you fell short. If the sharecropper falls short, we sock it to him. So if the sharecropper does more, then it's his tough luck. Okay? So there is a double standard. Tani, we learned. Hamakabo son michaver, son he receives a friend from his field, a field from his friend. Harei a koitzer. Among the work he has to do is koitzer harvest. Umamer make sheaves, the dutch to thresh, the zora to winnow, borer, and to sift. Now, hachoifer, somebody who digs ditches around the field. Va'kayel, somebody who measures the field. I think is like a form of surveyor. Va'santar, it's some sort of other individuals who works in your property. Shomrei here, the people who safeguard the city. Va'economus, the economist, who's in charge of the budget. So they get a field from each field they're involved with to get equal payments because they're all universally needed. Habayar, somebody who digs wells. Vabalon, bathhouse attendants. Vasapor, a barber. It depends who hires them. If the sharecropper hire them, then the sharecropper pays them. Mikoach Baal Bais, if the Baal Bais hire them, only Mikoach Baal Bais they get from the Baal Boss. Now there's a line missing here, which is in the Escorial. Amar Rabbi Law said, in general, all workers who are hired by the sharecropper, the sharecropper is required to pay for them. Mikoach Baal Bais, if they're hired by the Baal Boss, the Baal Boss pays for them. Okay? It's kind of arbitrary, but that's the way it works, because generally speaking, we're distinguishing between things which are necessary for the field. Schorim mina emtza, I didn't make that clear before sufficiently. But it says schorim be'emtza means that the sharecropper and the Baal Boss pay for them equally, because they both need the previous things, the diggers and the measurers and the watchmen. So both the Baal Boss and the sharecropper pay for them equally because they're both necessary. But these last specialties, it depends who hires them out, because sometimes sometimes the Oris needs a haircut and the Baal Boss does not, and similarly these other things. So therefore, in that case, the guy who hires the worker out, he's the one who pays for it. Okay. Halacha base. Somebody receives a field from his friend, be base or shalchin. And it's a field which is watered by by rain, right? No, by irrigation. I'm sorry, the water by irrigation, or Beis Ha'ilon, or it's trees which generally don't need irrigation, but there's no spring. Yove Shamayon, if the irrigation well dries up, or the trees get somehow chopped down. Tav on the sharecropper. These are acts of God for which the sharecropper is responsible. Okay, he's supposed to pay. Omar Lo, if he said, however, specifically he said, the sharecropper said, rent me base shalchin zu. No, it just should say, rent me this field. Even if it said, this is base shalchin. In essence, he was making the water supply part and parcel of the contract, right? Or saw the base Ilan Zu, or this field which has trees in it. He made the trees part of the contract. In that case, in that case, if the well runs dry, or if the tree gets chopped down, deduct from the sharecropper's responsibility to pay you. Okay? Makes sense. Already it said, you should know that this will be Avish Kolamayim, where the well went totally to spring, went totally dry. Baran, however, in Hava Moktarti, we initially have to go down 2 levels in order to get to the water. Vat is Avid Shlosha, Kume, and now you have to go down 3 levels. Amok, it's deeper. Yochim Meimerle, right, the water is lower down, the water table's lower down. Yochim Meimerle, you could say the sharecroppers, Loi Bevu Sagi, work at it, and it'll grow more. In other words, it's tough on you. No, it's only if the water is completely missing, then the guy's entitled, well, I wanted a water field, when he specified a water field. But if there's still water, it's just hard to get to, too bad. Keep digging, right. Nixon says if the tree is chopped down. On Rabbi Yitzchak it says, again, same thing, B'sheniktzas kolin, if the entire tree is chopped down, he said, Taina. All the trees in the field, I should say. So if there's still 10 planted per Beisah, which is 50 by 50 amos, you could say, no, it's your advantage, even though it's not. But he could say to him, it said, originally the trees are very close together, right? They wouldn't make much fruit. Now it's your advantage. Baram Kedon, Hinun Dalilin, now they are thinner. Yavin Sagi, they'll make much more fruit. So even though it's not true necessarily, but Lamaisa, what he's really saying is, I never promised you a rose garden. I promised you a patch of trees. You have a patch of trees, right? If they're thicker, they're set close together, set further apart. Lamaisa, you have trees. That's all I have to provide you, and you still have them. Okay? Either I'm receiving or produce more this way. Hamakabel son receives a field from his friend. If once he took it, he left it fallow, the dirty dog. Right? He didn't do his work. Shami no so kami realized, so we reckon how much it should have produced. And we give it, in other words, from the funds of the sharecropper to the landlord. Shu kaisiv lo, why? Because it says in the contract, if I leave it fallible, I don't work it, I shall be made for, I'll pay the best. And this is a case where he must pay the best. Alright, it says, Adam Raz teaches us. If somebody cancels, not cancels, if he, we had this earlier in the Masechta, if somebody prevents his friend from investing his wallet, investing his funds, right? I withhold your funds from you. You could be upset at me, but you can't, there's no remedy, right? Because we don't know how much money he would have made. He might not have made any money. He might have lost money. However, here we see that if I cause you to lose by not planting your field, then I have to reimburse you. Why? Because the income for a field is much more of a sure thing than the income from investments. So therefore, here Yitzhak does have to pay.
My question is
No, it's not by lobo because the field is there, so that's not considered double lobo. That's true, but it's. You're right. But obviously, it's possible. It won't happen, but it's reasonable. Maybe it's a garmi halacha, it's an almost direct causation. But you're right. It is a little bit difficult. maybe it's taka fine, not really. I'll leave it halacha. I understand what you're saying. How about the sfinos chanos umal? If it's something in the middle, like a ship or a store, you came out of that. What's the story? And there the shayter sal girsa, your taka potter, because there it's much more iffy. It's much of the shlomo. How long about? Hamakabel son mechaver, some receives a field from his friend. The logot solanakish, and he doesn't want to hoe, right? Amar lo, he doesn't weed. I'm sorry. Amar lo, so he says, "Ma'ich l'cho." What do you care? In other words, the guy, the lazy sharecropper says, "What do you care if I don't weed it? You'll get your comeuppance anyway. I was required to give you a certain lump sum. I'll give you your lump sum." So he says, "Ain't Shlomo, listen to him. Because the landlord says, tomorrow, in other words, at the end of the year, you're going to leave it. If you mile in front of some, it's going to grow there's different weed grasses. So you better hoe now." If someone receives a field from his friend, and it does not produce, so he says, "I don't want to be involved in this field, so losing proposition. Okay, let me cut my losses and get out of this." So, if there's enough grain growing in the field to make a pile, continue working with the field. Rabbi said, "Makit bakri." What is that? What kind of shit is a pile? Pile like this, a pile like that, a pile like this. What kind of pile are you talking about? And the field, it means if it produces enough seed to compensate for what the seed you scattered to begin with. Whatever seed you got put in is the seed you take out. Then that's the shiur of which the sharecropper still has to be involved in the field. Says the Gemara, how much is to set up a pile? Rabbi Yaakov bar Idi b'shem Rabbi Shem Levi uvak deshamid brachas. Has to be enough grain that if you stick a pitchfork in, the pitchfork will stand up and not fall. It's an interesting shiur, right? It's not on the Bible, I think. Maybe it is, but not the following point. Not only that's the case where the pitchfork, actually I think it's a shovel, but the shovel is on its head, meaning the receptacle part is sticking into the air, which obviously means that the wooden handle that's much higher. That's higher, right? So it's a higher barrier, right? Yeah, because, right. That's what it's saying. He said that on purpose. Okay? So this is besides the expenses. All this produce is besides the expenses. In other words, if this is besides the expenses, he has to be able to, there has to be some additional amount of profit to this extent. Not just the expenses of the one guy, of the Baal Bayit, of either one of them, but of both of them together. What's the tefillah which you mentioned in Mishnah? Kedei has enough about the amount of grain which you scatter in order to plant it to begin with. Okay, some receives a field from his friend. It's eaten by locusts. Onishtvor gets blighted, like the Irish potato blight. If it's throughout the country, throughout Ireland, then you take less for the chakirus, because obviously you have to deduct, because that's the way the country was spent. But if it's not a countrywide plague, rather localized, you don't deduct anything what he owes you, because he said it's your problem. It's not a universal problem. If you received it for a lump sum, not in grain or produce, but in money, regardless, he doesn't deduct from the principal, even if it's from the amount owed him, even if it's a makas medina, because on money there might be decree against grain, but there's no decree against money. But you should have found a way to make the money. We don't pass like it, but that's on the old. It's very interesting shita. It doesn't have to be throughout the country. It has to be throughout Ireland. If all that area, all that zone, literally all that direction, that's enough. Shimon bar Bava said, "Vusha Zora," that only if you planted it. In other words, you can't sit back and relax and say, "Well, there are locusts in the air. I'm not planting this year. You have to make a ishtalus. You have to try. Okay. Do yochel omar the yochel meimale? Otherwise, land could say that ilu avos aras havadas. So again, maybe this field, had you planted it, it would have been the lucky one and made it produce a lot. Okay. Says Maragatz Moshe Usodos Acheros. Wait a minute. Imagine this. What about if this sharecropper has other fields? Has other fields that no, I'm sorry, not if he does has other fields. This is a story about if there are other fields in the area which were blighted. So can't he say, well, what would have done if I would have planted it? You see, they're all blighted in this area. So you lo yochel meimer like can't he? What do you think? You can't say to him, Kucha brichel megalgim rishaya. The Kodesh Baruch sometimes rolls along the Shai, means he tells us Rachmana, he has Rachmanas on the Shai. Maybe a miracle would have occurred on this case. It's interesting that the story, I was totally off at a tangent, but the Gir shows, are the Meimar, lo yochel meimer, can't he say to him, Kucha megalgim rishaya? It doesn't say Kucha brichel. So it's interesting because the Lieberman learns from that in the Scorial. Actually, we say HaKadosh Baruch Hu, but the Baruch, we say it as if Baruch Hu is part of the name. But he says really the name is Kadosh. Just once we say Kadosh, we tack on Baruch Hu. And that's why the Girsa in the Scorial is Kadosh without Baruch Hu. It says Nafkamina is in Kaddish. When you say, what? Yeah, right. When we say, in fact, Nusach Ashkenaz, according to Lieberman, Nusach Ashkenaz has it right. Because we say, and everybody says, Brichel, right? But in Nuschari and Sfard also, they say, after, or main, after Brichel, which means they're learning that Brichel is part of the name. We're learning that Brichel is not part of the name. So Lieberman says that Scorial proves the Nusach Ashkenaz perspective, that it's Kucha, and then everybody says about that Brichel. Okay? So it's interesting.
No.
Which makes sense, because Kodesh Baruch is called the Kadosh.
The Holy One, blessed be He.
What? Yeah, but that's just a translation. But the Holy One, on the contrary, if you look in the English, the Holy One probably is the whole name. Kodesh Baruch Hu's, we say in Adiru, Kadoshu. So that's his name, the Kadosh. HaKadosh.
When we say blessed be He, which is Baruch.
When we say, for example, listen, we call Kodesh Baruch Hu HaMokom, right? HaMokom, you don't say HaMokom Baruch Hu. So you see there that the name is HaMokom, right? So you say here also the name is HaKadosh. That's what he's saying. I'm not saying it's not definitive, but that's what he wants to say. Okay. Says what about if he himself, the sharecropper, had other fields, or the landlord had other fields, and they were blighted? So can't the sharecropper say, listen, all my and all your other fields are blighted, so what tie did you have against me? Of course I went down to Florida, and I saw there was no hope. So says the landlord could say, and you were liable till here. Maybe Mikol Al, maybe this field was beyond, Chayabo was beyond the punishment of Kodesh Baruch Hu meant to impose upon me and you, and therefore you should have planted it. Okay? Core of Chitin. Okay? So, look, if it's a blighted or afflicted, you give him the same blighted grain which grew there. In other words, you don't go buy better grain from the marketplace. However, vice versa is true as well. If there was particularly good wheat in that field, he can't say to him, I'll pay you with grain I buy from the marketplace, which is inferior. So it works sometimes with advantage, sometimes disadvantage, but you always have to pay the sharecropping fee, or the sharecropping portion, out of the field itself, not from the marketplace. Okay? Now, the Girsa here in the Gemara is very messed up. Let's see the Pnei Moshe. Pnei Moshe brings down a better Girsa. If you look in the third line in the Pnei Moshe, it says the second word from the beginning line is Vehei Gimel, which is V'achi Garsina. Okay? So it says, we learn over there. Hamakabel Sadami, so if somebody receives a field from another Jew, a soil, Toirein v'noisin the Choiker has got to take off Truma before he gives it to him. Not Meiser, only Truma. Because halach is Truma has to be taken out, so Truma is taken out already in the field. You don't wait till the silo, you take it already in the field, so therefore the Choiker's got to take it out, or take off the Truma before he gives it to him. Right, Meir, Meiser v'toirein v'noisin. You have to take off Meiser and before you give it to him. Why is that? So it's explained because otherwise, you're paying off your debt with tevel. In other words, if you don't meiser first, and you have a debt to him to give a certain amount each year, so then you have to pay. You're paying off with tevel. Now, of course, Rabbi Yehuda argues. Tanakam argues. Tanakam holds, no, it's his field. You're not paying a debt with tevel. You're giving him the produce of his field. Now, it's true, you sharecropped it, and therefore it's really your field, but not to this extent. So that's the machlokas.
So pre-tax income.
Right. But so that's an issue. What's considered? Is it considered to be yours or not considered to be yours? Okay. It isn't from that field, from that which grew there, then all you have to do is take off truma and give it to him. From another field, from another type, so that you can have to meiser before you give it to him. If from that field, you gave him no matter if it's from that type or another type, meaning, let's say, instead of giving 10 bushels of wheat, you gave him 5 bushels of wheat and 5 bushels of barley. But the barley also grew in his fields, right? So the substitution is internal. So in that case, you still don't have to meiser because it's an internal substitution. Okay? If you give it to him from another field, regardless of the same type or a different type, meiser then for sure you have to take off meiser, because from his own field you could circumvent the meiser, only give the truma, because it's his own field you're giving him. But if you want to give it from elsewhere, so then you're really paying up a debt from elsewhere, paying up debt now to pay up a debt and derive hanor from tevel. Okay? That's Pnei Moshe basically, so as we just said, and we can just go on to the next halacha. Halacha Zayin. He receives a field from his friend to plant it. So in barley, you should not plant in wheat. Wheat debilitates the land more. Wheat is worse than land. I don't know why. I guess that's why it's machlo adam, because it's more quality. More quality saps more strength from the land. Okay. Chitim, if however the stipulation was to plant wheat, Yerushalmi is allowed to plant barley, because it's more beneficial. Shigam says you can't change the conditions under which it was given to you, no matter what. Kidneys, and we'll see why they more. Kidneys, if you accepted to plant legumes, you can't plant grain, which saps the strength of the land more. If you accept to plant grain, use for any kidneys, you can plant legumes again. Okay. I understand that the chitim, if you're supposed to plant barley, you can't plant wheat. But chitim, why if you accept to plant wheat, cannot plant grain? Why not? So it says the Gemara, maybe this is like Rabbi Law, Vasik Rabbi Law. So now, like Rabbi Law would be, Rabbi Law says later, and we haven't seen him yet. He says later, you should never plant 2 years in a row the same crop. So the reason why you can't, no matter how beneficial the crop is. So the reason why, therefore, that you can't change is because either you don't know what the Baal Bus did last year, or you don't know what he's going to do next year, after your term is up. So therefore, you can't deviate from what he says, even if you're planting something more beneficial, because you can't plant the same crop 2 years in a row. So that's the problem. Says no, maybe it's not just like Rabbi Law, but everybody agrees. The Yerushalmi is going like everybody over here. Why? Because how do you be going like everybody? So it's saying that Rav Shimon Gamliel's place, let's see the next line, the Tav Lam Gimel base, V'mokum she'ein sa'orin ki flying bechitim. Rav Shimon Gamliel holds that the reason why we don't let you plant barley instead of wheat is even though barley saps the strength to a lesser extent, is because the barley would have to be worth twice as much as the wheat in order to catch up, right, the value, because barley sells for less. So therefore he says it's also because barley doesn't sell for that much. But Tarakama doesn't really argue in Svara, but he's a different place. It's about a place where taka, the barley, will give you more, double the amount than wheat. In other words, it's going to, because then it catches up in the value. So if you get double the yield, you're going to catch up. And the Orei Yosher says geographically, in the south of Eretz Yisrael, where the sun is stronger, so then barley will grow at a much quicker rate, and it's shaykh that you'll get double the crop of barley where you would have planted wheat. As opposed to north of Eretz Yisrael, so therefore the machlokas Tanakama and Shimon Gamliel is not machlokas in halacha, but not machlokas then in geography, whether you will be able to exceed what was expected by switching to the other crop. Okay? Halacha Ches. HaMakabel, Mr. Zuger. Halacha Ches, 66. Turn the page. HaMakabel son Mechaber. HaMakabel son Mechaber Shani Muatos. If somebody receives a field from his friend for a short-term contract, you are a short-term sharecropper. You shouldn't plant flax. Nor do you have the right to harvest the sycamore beans. Okay? Because it takes 7 years to recover from flax. It takes 7 years for the sycamore beans to regenerate themselves. And therefore it's just sapping the strength unfairly. If you got it for 7 years, you're the long-term sharecropper. Then you can plant the first year of flax because it'll recover within the next 7 years. All of and that first year you can also harvest the sycamore wood because by the time you give it back, it'll have replenished itself. Okay? The top of Lamadal Ralph, 67. Now there's a brisa missing here. Tani, it should say this. You don't have this brisa. I will read it to you. Hamakaba, this is Shari Terzio puts it in. Hamakaba son mechabel zarachitim. You received, similar to the previous Mishnah, you received the field to plant wheat. Laser and a pishtan. You should not plant flax. Barley, maybe yes, that's the Mishnah said, because barley might be better. But flax, oh boys, flax is worse, because flax really saps the strength of the land. Pishtan, if you receive the field to plant flax, laser and chitim, you should not plant wheat. And the one is going to ask, why not? Wheat, l'chor, is a better crop. So, orim laser and a pishtan. If you receive the field to plant barley, you shouldn't plant flax, obviously, right? But also, pishtan laser and a sorim. If you receive the field to plant flax, you should not plant instead barley, and that's a question, why not? Okay, now the Gemara kicks in. Okay, I understand if you receive the field to plant wheat, don't plant it flax. But pishtan laser and a chitim? Why? Pishta lokard shlosha shonim. Now here it says only 3 years. I don't know. The Mishnah sound like it takes 7 years to recover, but here it says only 3 years. I guess it's a minimum of 3 years. The same arcane. And you're going to say, don't plant the wheat instead? The wheat is much more beneficial. It doesn't brew it for 3 years. So Piresh Rabbi Menachem Achi Rabbi Gurion Kumi Rabbi Law. Rabbi Menachem, the brother of Rabbi Gurion, said in front of Rabbi Law, Mutav Lazora Pishton Achar Pishton. It's best to plant even flax after flax, but not below. It should be Lazora Chitim Achar Chitim. Not even wheat, not wheat after wheat. In other words, wheat, 2 years crop wheat in a row is extremely debilitating. Don't ask me why. It's even more debilitating than flax after flax. I have no idea why. So since that's the case, so therefore, if he says, if he told you to plant flax, you shouldn't substitute wheat or barley, because it's entirely possible that the previous year he planted wheat or barley in the field, right? And therefore, to have 2 years of that in a row is much more debilitating than have 2 years flax in a row. So therefore, in that case, better to have flax than flax. Okay.
In 2 years, you have all the flax. I thought it took 7 years for the land to
Well, it says yeah, but I guess some people it's worth it for them for the short-term yield. But it's much, and even that is much better than doing wheat after wheat. Okay. One more halacha. Hamakabel son mechaver sheva shonim b'shva meos dinar. Somebody received a field from his friend for 7 years for 700 dinar. So it's 7 years, right? 100 dinar a year, and a shvis minyan. Shemitah doesn't count. So actually, how many years does it end up being? 8 years. 8 years, because you skipped the Shemitah year. However, he said that the condition was Shavua Echad, one Shemitah b'shva meos dinar, then a shvis minyan. Depends how you phrase the contract. It was 7 years or one Shavua, which means 1 7-year cycle. Okay? Tani, we learned that Makabel son b'chaver is not directly related to the Mishnah. Someone receives a field from his friend. Zohar Sharachs, he planted the first year of a load samcha, nothing grew. Kovin asal Zohar Shnia, we compelled him to try a second year. Shnia v'lod simcha, if he planted a second year, didn't grow, ain't Kovin oisal l'Zohar Shlishis, doesn't have to plant it a third year. Now, there's a whole simis here in Yerushalmi, and the Bava expands much more. There's a big machlokas throughout Shas. How many times does it take to establish a chazaka? 2 times or 3 times, right? Normally, you say a chazaka is established how many times? 3 times. But remember, by a woman whose husbands die, how long does it take to establish 2, right? So here it sounds like this field is like the killing wife, right? And in 2 times it establishes a chazaka. So there's a whole still discussion, why is it not 3 here as well, like all over Shas? But here it seems like it is 2. Now, obviously one can give answers. Amr Shlomo said, and part of the answer is what Rish Lakish says. It's only true about a field which has not been checked out and is tried and true. If it was a tried and true field, so then you still have to try a 3rd time before it establishes a chazaka, then nothing is going to grow. Okay? All right. We'll stop here for this evening. The 3.5 blot. Tomorrow night we are in striking distance to finish the Masechta. Only 3 blot left. No guarantees, but it's possible.